From the governor, a plea for a program and the legislators who support it. Some maneuvering room from Washington, enough to be persuasive. The stakes in 2 states, what impact on our state? But first, the outlook this year for the party that once dominated our state. Arkansas Week, next.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.
This is Arkansas Week.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Arkansas Week, Medicaid expansion and all the politics surrounding that. We'll get to that in just a moment with our roundtable. First, the man in charge of the Democratic Party in Arkansas is Vince Encelaco, the Democratic State Chair, and with Super Tuesday approaching, he's our guest. Vince, thanks very much for coming in.
Glad to be here. Good morning.
You've got a big job. And that is a job of rebuilding when a party, when so much of the oxygen it would seem, local and national, is being sucked out of the room by the Republican side.
Fortunately, I'm old enough to remember how this has swayed back and forth now for, all my life. This started back in the early 70s, and, it has gone back and forth. And in fact, I remember that Congress has, I think, switched parties 5 times since Bill Clinton was president, so going back and forth. So it's, I think this is just a phase that we're going through right now. And whenever you have the presidency, it's always tough on the Congress. And I also believe that Congress is just as polarized as our nation, as our people have become.
Where do you see the state right now in terms of that polarization?
Oh, I think it's still very much there, but I don't think it's as sharp as it used to be. I remember the real difficulties over the first couple of years when President Obama first took office, and the whole health care issue came up here in Arkansas, and it was pretty tough going there. And we saw how the whole climate has changed here as a result of what was, as we saw local elections essentially become nationalized. But I think that has calmed down some, but it's not by no means over.
How calm is it, though? Will it remain?
I think that's probably
as institutionalized as it seems to be.
I think it depends on, look, as long as when you run for state representative, you have to worry about who's running for president and what's going on nationally. When you ran for state representative, you used to talk about schools and roads, and now you have to worry about what's going on nationally. All of these elections. I remember a school board member in Southwest Arkansas ran on ending Obamacare. These issues have become nationalized. I think once that goes away, I'm not really sure how long that's going to take for that to go away.
How much of that is based on policy and how much personality? They're obviously intertwined, bonded, but to what extent?
Well, one feeds the other, and now when I think the whole thing about social media has taken on a life of its own that made all of this unpredictable. I don't think anybody saw any of this coming. I think Democrats love to blame Fox News and Republicans love to blame MSNBC. But I think it's more a factor of social media where people can communicate with each other, and when you add to the mix the uninformed information that goes out there that almost becomes factual. And I think that has a lot of it. Until we learn as how to run campaigns and really be able to influence that, I think that's got a lot to do with it.
Well, you mentioned the social issues and looking, and to some extent economic issues as well. Is it not possible that Arkansans, like much of the rest of the South, have weighed certainly the two polls anyway, and concluded, hey, the GOP represents me, my interests, my beliefs far better than the party of my forefathers?
Sure, but that's again a result of what I was just talking about. I mean, on a couple of social issues, they may feel that way, but if you really look at what the Democratic Party stands for in the long view, it far more represents the people of the South and rural Arkansas when it comes to the issues that the Democratic Party was built on and continues to evolve, and whether it's Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and education, infrastructure, roads. I mean, all of that. When you look at what the Democratic Party was built on, really, rural Arkansas is very dependent on those things, and rural parts of the South. So I think economically, perhaps not. But when you get into, I mean, economically, I think we are absolutely the party of most people. But I think more and more people tend to vote on issues that. On one issue or two issues. And I think that is what I'm talking about. I think that's a result of social media.
Well, it's obviously a powerful tool in the hands of whoever knows how to use it effectively.
Exactly right. That's exactly right.
But those issues aren't going to fade likely in the next 2, 4, 6 years. Are you, some of my Republican friends say, hey, we're looking at, borrow a Kevin Phillips line, we're looking at a permanent Republican majority here in Arkansas and across much of the rest of the South. Would you dispute that?
Oh, sure. I don't think anything's permanent anymore. I don't believe that for 1 second. I think it depends.
Well, that book was written about 30 years ago too.
That's true.
Yeah.
That is true. But I don't. But and it took a long time for it to reach Arkansas. I mean, it really covered the South far before it came to Arkansas. But now that it's here, I think it's just going to depend on who's elected nationally, and whether we get people who can talk to each other, whether it becomes less polarized. I think if people, eventually people are going to get really tired of the polarization and start talking to each other, and then they're going to want to elect people who represent those views. I tend to think that people think that Washington is polarized. Well, Washington's pretty much always represented what the society is.
Well, we are going to, whether you want to call him a lame duck or not, whether he becomes a lame duck in November or not, he's in the final year of his presidency, and then indisputably a polarizing figure across much of the country, President Obama. Should Mrs. Clinton be the Democratic nominee, as still seems likely? And you've got a long association with Secretary Clinton.
Yes.
But whether it's Secretary Clinton or Senator Sanders, they're still perceived to be well to the left of most Southerners, or am I wrong?
Well, I think in the case of Secretary Clinton, I think she probably far more represents the views of Southern, most people in the South. I mean, her whole political career started in Arkansas. Now, again, if you want to just talk about specific social issues, I think, you could make that argument. But if you want to talk about economic issues, that's an entirely different story. My biggest thing that I love to talk about is the minimum wage, where we worked so hard last year to raise the minimum wage in Arkansas, and we received 65% of the vote, and then 20% of those people turned around that voted for an issue that the Democrats put on the ballot, worked really, really hard to get done, and then of course voted against the Democratic Party because they were driven by one or two social issues. And eventually, I think those things. Will that still be controlled by the majority of the voters or not in the South, particularly in Arkansas? I mean, one of the things we're not talking about is the impact when there is a change in the White House that has. And I don't think anybody really knows what that is yet.
Vince Etzelaco, thanks very much for your
Sure.
time.
Thank you.
And a footnote, next week in this time period, our guest will be the GOP State Chair, Doyle Webb. And we'll be right back with our roundtable. Back with a roundtable now. Michael Hiblin joins us from KUAR Public Radio in Central Arkansas. Steve Bronner, an independent journalist. Ernie Dumas, also an independent and a columnist for Arkansas Times. Thanks to all for coming in. Let's start, Michael, Steve, Ernie, with the private option. It's still called the private option, and I thought a really remarkable if you want to call it, outreach by Governor Hutchinson at midweek. It was a tacit plea for support for extending, making Arkansas works of the private option, basically continuing the expanded Medicaid program.
It was definitely a different level of salesmanship from Governor Hutchinson. He had a press conference on Wednesday in which he very forcefully made his case, not just about the private option on, or Arkansas Works as he's calling it, on the merits of the policy, but also defending himself personally against accusations that supporting the private option is supporting Obamacare. He said it is not. This is the hand I was dealt. I was not here when it was passed, but this is the best that we can do for Arkansas. We would be crazy to turn down the money, especially since it's covered 200,000 people. Then the next day he made the same case to the Health Reform Legislative Task Force, which is going to help create some of the legislation that would be voted on in a special session. And again, much of the same atmosphere, much of the same effort on his part to try to sell his program. He did present a letter from Health and Human Services Secretary Sylvia Burwell, which didn't say a lot, but did seem to say that, you know, Arkansas is on the right track with the changes he's making. But it's going to be a bumpy ride. He said that we're going to call a special session on health care in early April, 10 days or so before the fiscal session, which will be April 13th. So we'll ride through there and we'll see what happens.
It was a defense not only of himself and the program, or his approach to it anyway, but some of the incumbents, Michael, and candidates who had supported it in the past.
Yeah, working to try and defend some of these legislators who are going to be facing challenges from people even further to the right. Republicans who had backed the private option in the past, but working to defend them himself and really make the case for why Arkansas needs this. Said if we don't continue this Medicaid expansion, you'll see a hole in the federal or in the state budget of $100 million. That would affect his highway plan and really ripple down through everything else. So really trying to work to build that 3/4 vote that will be needed to take money from the federal government. And a lot, especially opponents of the Medicaid expansion, are suggesting the votes aren't going to be there.
Well, they're not there now, Ernie. I think that's
probably not. I mean, it's hard to say. You know, he barely got the that 3/4 majority in the regular session a year ago to continue the private option, and it took a massive effort on his part to get that done. But look, nothing could be more important to Asa Hutchinson right now than this the private option. Arkansas Works. His whole administration, success of his whole administration hangs in the balance on this thing. And he's got, I can't imagine a more difficult job than he's got. He's got to sell that. He's got, in a way, to sell Obamacare while opposing Obamacare. And so what he's trying to do is say, look, I didn't have any part of Obamacare. I still hate Obamacare. I hope they repeal Obamacare, and maybe the next administration will repeal it. But at the same time, he has to defend it, because the private option, which is the Medicaid expansion phase of Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, pumps all of this money into Arkansas. It's his whole budget rests upon the continuation of the Medicaid expansion of Obamacare. His highway program, if the Medicaid expansion goes down and ends this July or end of the year or whenever, then he doesn't have a highway program. His highway program is meaningless because it rests upon the transfer of general revenues, and it rests on this massive surplus every year for the next 10 years. That's his highway program, and it won't be there without the private option. So in a way, what he has to do is go back and in a deft sort of way, do what the Democrats failed to do back in 2010 when they had the big battle over Obamacare, and all of the the Chamber of Commerce and the insurance companies at first, and the Republican Party and everybody opposing Obamacare. With all of these things, the terrible things it's going to do. It's going to kill Medicare. It's going to wreck the state budgets. It's going to cause massive job losses. And everybody in Arkansas particularly, and across the South and much of the country, thought Obamacare is terrible. And now he's got to, and the Democrats who voted for it in Arkansas and in the rest of the South, nobody came out and defended it. So it was really a kind of the PR was one way. So that's the issue that he has to deal with. So it's a I can't imagine a more difficult task than what he has to do.
Within hours, the Democratic Party had issued a press release in favor of continuing the experiment. I'm not sure whether they were doing Mr. Hutchinson any favors by issuing
I don't think so, but
that all. Steve, do you have a sense at all of whether these, no matter how cosmetic, the term Mr. Hutchinson does not care for, or how substantive the changes that Washington indicates it will tolerate, enough so far to be persuasive on their own? Or is he going to have to give up something?
He is going to have to stake a lot of his political
jawboning favors through.
He's got to fight for this really hard on a personal, one-on-one level. Get legislators in the office, argue the merits, and then also do whatever else it takes. In 2014, it hung on the balance when one state senator, Senator Jane English, was persuaded to change her mind by Governor Mike Beebe in exchange for a total redo of the way that the state does its workforce education. So this may be more than one vote this time. We're looking ahead to a primary where there are at least 3 Senate races where this is the primary issue between someone who supports the private option or Arkansas Works, someone who's against it. And when you're talking about the razor-thin margins, that's really important. On the other hand, all this is going to happen before the primary. The primary is after this debate. So we'll see how long a term this fix is going to be, and also how the primary results will affect how legislators vote, even though the primary's already happened in the special session.
Yeah, I think that's the key to it. If he succeeds in lifting all of those challenged candidates that voted for the private option, if they win their elections, that would help. If they go down to defeat, or most of them go down to defeat, that's going to send a message to others. You can't do it. Now, I think there are other ways that he can ultimately that he can continue that private option, regardless. But there'll all be challenges and require some litigation. But he's really got his work cut out for him.
Well, I'm told that obviously he wasn't kidding. He's got 2 budgets in mind, and one an alternative budget, absent the Affordable Care Act funds. And one cabinet member told me last night, it's not going to be pretty. Nobody's going to much like the alternative budget, because we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars.
That's news to me. So you might actually see that budget.
No, I haven't seen it, but
I'm saying if that's the case, then if he gets desperate enough, we might see that budget as a way to try to encourage people to vote for the one with Arkansas Works.
And we'll see how effectively the governor can twist arms, can be a salesperson to this, can make the case that that would be the issue. The fact that Mike Beebe was able to get this through was very telling of his abilities. So we'll see really how effective the governor is at working even within his own party.
And tight it was. On to money of a different sort, and that's the dollars that are flowing into a very high-profile campaign for Chief Justice of the Arkansas Supreme Court.
Yeah, and this is going to be the most expensive in terms of money spent for advertising ever so far in Arkansas. And a lot of dark money. Overall, I've seen a couple of differing total numbers between the amount spent by the campaigns of Courtney Goodson and Dan Kemp. The Democrat Gazette reported it was close to $1 million. I saw 800,000 on the AP yesterday. But yes, you've got this outside group that is just pouring so much money into this against Courtney Goodson. Kemp, on the other hand, is disavowing any knowledge of this money coming in and saying that he's not a part of this. But you have this group now that is pouring so much money into the state and other races around the country. This is part of a federal trend where you're seeing these Washington groups wanting to get involved in state and local court races.
They don't much like trial lawyers.
And Judge Kemp, should be said, not only did he disavow having anything to do with that ad attacking his opponent, the last one, anyway, he says it is morally wrong. He comes out and says that it's unfair, that she should not be criticized for voting to strike down the voter registration act of a couple of years ago. It was a unanimous decision of the Supreme Court, Republicans and Democrats, whether you recognize justices as Republicans or Democrats or liberals or conservatives, they all voted that way. And it was simply an interpretation of the Constitution. So he condemns that. But this is not the first time this has happened. 2 years ago, in another Supreme Court race, you had another dark money outfit in Washington, I think just had a post office box, again, never divulged the people who put up the money. And it took down another candidate to the Supreme Court on the other side of the issue. So this is not the first time, and I suspect may see some more of that money, that kind of money, maybe from a different outfit in the closing days of the race. And not only that race, but also there's a second Supreme Court race as well, and I think we'll probably see some pretty nasty ads in that as well. In fact, I got a mailer yesterday in that race. So we're going to see a lot of that in the next few weeks.
Well, that would be the Mason-Womack race, and
Right.
there was an endorsement this past week from the former governor.
Governor Beebe endorsed Clark Mason, who's running against Sean Womack. One attorney endorsing another attorney. How much that matters, we don't know. Jeb Bush got a lot of endorsements early in the race, and it hadn't helped him so much in his race for presidency. But it is another feather in the cap.
Oh, we ought to point out that Mr. Womack is an attorney as well, not only an attorney but a
he is.
judge.
And he's kind of identifiable as a Republican. He was a state senator or representative or senator, I forgot which, I guess.
Senate both, I think.
Yeah, he might have been both before he ran for the judgeship up there in northwest Arkansas. But I think he's right. I don't think. It's nice to have the governor. Governor Beebe was very popular, and I suppose still is. But I don't think endorsements in these kind of races amount to very much at all.
Well, we may find out how much endorsements count in South Carolina. I'm inclined to. Well, we'll just have to see. But anyway, South Carolina votes on Saturday, followed shortly enough by Nevada. But Mr. Rubio, by the way, Michael, will be appearing in Little Rock on Sunday.
Yeah, we just got word early this morning, an email sent out at 6 a.m. saying that Marco Rubio will make his first visit to Arkansas, speaking at a rally at the Old State House, downtown Little Rock, on the Sunday afternoon. And that will be significant. This week we had a group of 28 Arkansas legislators come out to endorse him. Haven't seen a lot of endorsements in this state. We have had Representatives Rick Crawford, Steve Womack, and Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin declare their support for Rubio, whereas Asa Hutchinson, the governor, Senator John Bozeman, and Representatives French Hill and Bruce Westerman, who had previously backed Huckabee, so far as we record this, have not endorsed any candidates. So it will be interesting to hear from Rubio.
Well, Mr. Rubio apparently thinks he'll survive South Carolina, all right. By all accounts, he's likely to, quite likely to.
Well, South Carolina has typically been a very good predictor of who the next president's going to be, much better than Iowa. That's the next vote. It's kind of make or break for Jeb Bush. And what happens in South Carolina will affect what happens in Arkansas, obviously. We'll be looking at perhaps a smaller field or at least a field that's going to be much more narrow as far as who is really the likely candidates to win. But right now, the polls show that Trump's going to win South Carolina and Nevada. He'll be on a 3-state winning streak, so we'll just have to wait and see what happens March 1st.
Yeah, how much Mo is Mo, Ernie?
I don't know, but I think Rubio and everybody now, I think the party establishment, as the Republican Party establishment, has decided this is our only choice. We've got to have Rubio. He's the only one who might be able to take it out. But his chances of getting the nomination diminish by the day, and it depends upon Jeb Bush and also Governor Kasich getting his competitors, his competitors for the center of the party. They've got to get out and right away. If after the primary on Saturday, Jeb Bush stays in, again taking votes away, because after that the mathematics get very difficult to stop either Trump or Ted Cruz, and that's what the party establishment, I think, nearly unanimously wants to happen, is somebody besides Ted Cruz and especially Donald Trump. So they've got to recognize reality and get out if Jeb Bush and Governor Kasich, if they want the party to survive.
Got to end it there because we're out of time. Gents, thanks to you for coming in. As always, thanks to you for watching. See you next week.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.